Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I want to give you guys Void Knight. That's right. It is my Void Knight build. It is a build that utilizes Smite and attribute stacking, and it is very different than anything I have seen. And I quite firmly believe it is about just the strongest Void Knight build out there right now. So what does it look like? We'll give you guys a little bit of gameplay footage here. So this is like a Corruption 200 Ouroboros, I believe. It's hard to catch it because, yeah, the guy just dies like instantly. There we go. Yeah, so, 185% more health and damage, and I'm basically just standing in everything. And this character is level 98, and while the planner, like the goal for this character, is fairly ambitious, I'm playing super bare bones. I had no unique items during this clip. I just got a belt like a little while later. But just to give you guys an idea, it is a build that is just extremely strong, extremely tanky. It has extreme recovery, and it is playable completely out of the box. You don't need any items. All the power is coming from the skills and the abilities themselves. So let's get into it here. How does it work? So it's a build that heavily focuses on Void Knight. Eventually we will go crit, and this will give us like a whole bunch of crit multiplier. But it's a pretty standard setup for Sentinel. I actually do not like getting Sigils of Hope. I tried it. I think it's no good. In terms of the abilities that we are using, we have Smite. And you might notice that Smite is casting like 5 or 6 smites every time I smite. See that? Yeah. So why is it doing that? Well, it's doing that because the Void Knight, the class mechanic is to echo melee attacks and void spells. Baseline is 10. You get it to 20, 30, and 40. So what does that mean? That means that when I smite, 40% of the time, it'll smite again through like an echo a second later, even though it's not happening right now. Oh, I guess it's just not really showing the animation here. But yeah, Smite also has a double cast, and I'm pretty sure the double cast isn't like a triggered skill, so I believe the double cast can also trigger an echo. So I believe you can get 4 smites from a smite, if you're lucky enough, anyway. And it does utilize the tech that a lot of paladins have been utilizing, which is Healing Hands with Divine Barrier. And if you have an item that converts health to ward, which we just get like an experimental affix on the gloves, it basically gives you a good amount of ward. So you see right now I have like, I'm getting about like 1700 ward per hit. But again, with everything up, we can get a lot of ward. Like right now, we're at like 17,000 ward. Yeah, it's not bad. 17,000 ward is pretty good when your ward retention is like 60%. The big issue is that it's just going down because I'm not really utilizing the full build that I'll show you in a second on how that will work. I was getting there. I was starting to farm. But the idea is that we use the Smite tech with Healing Hands, which is very much like a Paladin thing. You guys have maybe seen that before. Smite does a lot of damage. You can lose a great amount of health in order to gain a lot of damage, but we don't care about the health too much because we heal it back up through Healing Hands, like the heal over time still heals. These are massive percent bonuses for hits. We are using Void Smite because we are playing a Death Knight, so it gets void damage, we get flat damage there, we get flat damage there, and we make Smite scaling instead of attunement vitality. So the goal of the build is to get 90 vitality, so we're getting like 90 flat damage. So basically, this character, while it uses a similar tech to some of the Paladin builds with Smite and Healing Hands, chance to Healing Hands on Smite, it's very different because we actually do crazy amounts of damage. We don't have quite the amount of healing effectiveness a paladin has access to, but I've done corruption up until about 350 with this character, and honestly, it's kind of boring. There is no boss, there is no mechanic, there is no mob that can damage you through your ward. And you still have 2,000 health because, well, even though we have literally no health on the gear, the character is just, it makes sense to get vitality because vitality gives us flat damage. So in terms of the gear, this is super bare bones. You know, you want strength. The healing hands helps, but you don't really need it. The void damage plus the spell void damage is nice, but you don't really need it. Strength is fine. The damage is completely insane. We have much higher base damage than paladins. We have much better damage-oriented passives as a Void Knight. And we have the 40% extra echo multiplier on top of everything. So we're doing like double or triple damage that paladins can do just with Smite. I really love a staff for this build. You can get like massive attributes, spell damage, cast speed, the void penetration, all the damage is void. You get some void penetration on your amulet, spell damage, strength, you know, cast speed. You want to get cast speed wherever you can. But this gear is super bare bones. This belt has just given me some ward, and considering that before I had the belt, nothing came even close to getting through my ward, well, it doesn't matter too much. We use Singularity. Singularity, if you have 0 crit investment, is actually an unbelievably strong item. So we can't crit, but we get a damage multiplier on our hits, get a little bit of healing effectiveness, and armor shred through the idols. Now, it's not just about smiting. It's not just about smiting. Even though the smites do a lot of damage, we are also utilizing a few other skills. So we're utilizing Volatile Reversal, which is pretty common. This ability sends you back in time for 2 seconds, but it does like a Void Pulse, and the Void Pulse causes the target to take increased damage based on how many points you have in this thing. But there's 2 Void Rifts, and the cooldown is short enough that you can cast it, so the enemy's taking 60% more damage, and in some cases it's taking 120% more damage, but we're getting lots of cast speed, lots of move speed, and just lots of cool stuff from using this ability. Also, this ability is purely instant, so it takes nothing away from your character to use it other than the positioning, which we have Lunge for. Lunge is unspec'd, but keep in mind, we have a... Is it 2 second? 2 points. Oh yeah, because I lost cooldown recovery. My old belt had cooldown recovery. So it was a 2 second cooldown with cooldown recovery on belt. And Lunge needs a target, but is otherwise the strongest unspec'd skill that I have used so far in last Epoch. So you can lunge. Was it a bad lunge? You can teleport back. It's just like ridiculous. In terms of the other skills, we're using Anomaly. Anomaly pushes forward in time, but in our case, we disable the forward in time. This is a mechanic that you utilize with a dot-based build, but we're a hit-based build. It is going to give us void damage multiplier times 2, effectively, for 4 seconds when we use it. This doesn't have 100% uptime, but it's pretty good uptime. What it does do is give us a Void Shred, so this will give you 8 stacks of Void Shred, and max slow stacks. Void Shred is minus resist. It's extremely powerful in this game. Now, normally you can go to 10 stacks. With this, it goes to like 9. Usually it's 8, but if you're recasting it, like in the middle of a stack, it's like between 8 and 9. And considering the cap is 10, that means that in terms of the blessings, you can get like the Void Damage blessing instead of the Void Shred, which helps you scale your Void damage. By the way, the amount of void damage I have actually doesn't actually show properly here, but the amount of void damage I have on this character is about 1,400. So just an enormous amount of just raw damage. We're also using Devouring Orb, and Devouring Orb is kind of like a spinny ball thingy, and you hit stuff with it. I don't have the extra radius because it'll hit the same target more than that, and because I get the targets with Lunge constantly, I don't actually have to often walk to my targets. So I'm casting this close to on cooldown. It has a pretty fast cast speed. It overall does more damage than Smite because it hits like 4, sometimes 5 times, sometimes 6 if we're moving like in the right, but 4 or 5, let's just say. But it also gives you a number of other buffs. You can get speed, so this is attack, cast, and movement speed. And most builds that get this focus their damage around it, but from my testing, Smite single target is extremely good. And with Devouring Orb in the mix, it goes up even a little bit. But these points here, they basically do like splash void damage when something dies near a ball. But because the balls are all close to my character, what this means is when one thing dies, it's like 5 void novas happen. But then if there's like 5 mobs, that's like 25 void novas happening. So the idea is that we have these balls hovering around us, and when we get to a pack, we smite it. Smite hitting one thing is probably going to kill it, and then when that dies, it'll often cause a chain reaction of Devouring Orbs splash void nova damage. And the procced void damage, every single void thing, it scales off of your vitality. Oh baby. Flat damage from vitality, and because we're not going crit, we have an enormous amount of % spell and void damage to scale that up massively. It's maybe the strongest non-crit build that I've seen in terms of damage output. I also choose to do this because I mostly want to focus on the overall damage of my character. A lot of builds that use Devouring Orb, they put more points into void penetration or whatever else. This gives you global void more damage, a multiplicative, and it gets doubled if you have 90 vitality. Now, I don't have 90 vitality, but the idea is that eventually you get 90 vitality. In fact, I'm not even level 100, but I will get there. I've just kind of come to a point where this character, where it's just such an insane character, and it doesn't require anything, that I haven't felt particularly motivated to go out and farm the end game version of this build. But you know what? I will include this character exactly as it is, so you can play it. This is a character that's ridiculously powerful, starting from like level 25. And yeah, you can just clear anything you want in the game with this setup. No uniques required. I can just take off my belt and I'd still be immortal versus any content, probably up until about 1,000 corruption with this build. And again, we have like without the belt, I was playing without the belt. Without the belt, I had 28 ward retention and I was invincible. Well, the idea is that we do play crit in the end. We're going to have almost 100% crit chance, and 320 crit multi is this current setup. 10,000 armor, 90 vitality, 95, so that will actually activate an additional 10 more void damage from the Devouring Orbs. Now, the passive skill tree setup is pretty much the same, except for this node, Blade Master. So if you're using an axe or a sword, you get 30 attack and cast speed. This is an insane node, but I'm not using it right now because I'm using a staff. Staves are actually really, really good baseline for this build. And like I mentioned, we get the crit multi, which gives us like 78 crit multi chance. Now, I'm actually using a weapon that doesn't have any spell damage on it. The Cleaver Solution is one of the craziest items in Last Epoch. As a caster, you wouldn't use it. You wouldn't use it because you really need the flat added damage, the added spell damage on your weapon. It's not really a stat that shows up very often, and when it does, it's in very small amounts on other types of gear. The thing is, we're playing a Vitality stacking Void Knight. So we have 95 added spell damage from our Vitality. This is actually more than most characters can get on their two-handed weapon. Like that staff has 91, So we don't need it. We can use the Cleaver. The Cleaver has +1 all skills, which is actually pretty significant. That's going to be like about 20% more damage, and the more damage to bleeding enemies is also a multiplier. So we have 2 multipliers, and the weapon itself bleeds as the implicit, so you don't actually need a source of bleeding. And we have the strength, and your intelligence is equal to your strength, which gives me, with this current setup, 530 ward retention. So this, if I match it with like my current cast speed, would probably be around like 30 to 40,000 ward. But this character actually has higher cast speed. Well, eventually you'd want to get a little bit better cast speed, at least there, and it'll have higher cast speed because you actually have the cast speed nodes in Blade Master, and the cast speed on the offhand, and the cast speed from Devotion. So how much ward will this character peak at? I don't know, 50,000, 60,000? At that point, it really doesn't matter. We're not using dual wield. We have like crazy armor. This character is probably going to be pretty invincible at whatever content you play it, and this setup is probably going to do like double or triple the damage my current setup has, which is still crazy damage at that point. Now, so the character, it gets its crit chance from Peak of the Mountain, and you really want to use these boots. This is a heavy attribute stacker. Strength is converted to int. Strength gives you crazy armor and some damage with some skills we don't really care about too much. But we do want attunement, because attunement gives us healing percent with healing hands, which gives us more ward per cast. And we want vitality, because vitality gives us flat added damage. So you really need these boots, and you really need these helm. They're very common, but you do have to go out there and farm them. You have to do them from the Lightless Arbor dungeon, which is kind of what I started doing, and you have to get decent legendary modifiers, because these boots don't even have move speed baseline. So that is something that you have to work towards. The amulet is very common. The cleaver is extremely common. I have about 21 LP cleavers. I don't have a single 2 LP, so that's kind of crazy, but I'm getting there. But yeah, otherwise, this setup is just completely insane. I don't think I'm going to take this character all the way right now, because I'm already playing the game on toddler difficulty with this character, is what I'm trying to say. So, you know, quadrupling my survivability and tripling my damage, it's not really going to change the character all that much. But if you guys want to see the setup, I do have the builders below. If you guys do want to make this character happen, because you have to keep in mind, I do play on solo character found, so I don't share gear or anything between my characters. So it does take some time to build up some of these characters, but I've had a lot of fun with this one. I do think it is just about the strongest Void Knight build in the game right now. Honestly, from what I've seen out there, by an enormous margin. And I do want to mention that the current build, because a lot of the builds, like the Warlocks and stuff, they get like 70,000 ward or something. They're doing that through like bugs. The current setup with Healing Hands proccing from Smite, that's not a bug. That'll probably get nerfed because it's ridiculous, but this build does not use bugged mechanics. And, you know, people talked about the fact that the healing effectiveness, it probably shouldn't work before it gets converted to ward. That's probably true, and if they do make that change, not having to get healing effectiveness is actually pretty awesome. Yeah, screw that. I don't want to get heal effectiveness. I could easily stack more armor or regen and use the Jeweler Relic, so I can get like lots of ward that way. I think if the Healing Hands didn't have any healing effectiveness at all, this would still be a character that would have like 15,000 ward or more. And it also has like 2,000 health, because that is a zero investment health pool from the vitality and stat stacking overall. Pretty nuts. Hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.